Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Ancient Babylon. Ancient Babylon was one of the most influential cities in Mesopotamia. This incredible place was the focal point of art, culture, and civilized society for 2,000 years. It was founded prior to 2000 BC on the edge of the Euphrates River, 60 miles from modern Baghdad in what is now Iraq. It was in the city of Babylon that a sophisticated system of law was formed and the first universal language was created. While there may have been other languages outside Babylon, Babylonian was learned all across the Middle East so that people could communicate across borders. It was an international language that helped facilitate trade and cross-kingdom cooperation. Babylon is most famous today for two of its most legendary features. First, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. If the stories are true, this ancient wonder was built by biblical king Nebuchadnezzar II to appease his wife. It was supposedly the most spectacular artificial garden in the world. The city was also home to the biblical Tower of Babel, which most archaeologists agree was in fact the ziggurat known as the Etemenanki. In ancient Sumerian, that means temple foundation of heaven and earth. Babylon truly was the center of civilized society up until about 1200 BC. That was when things got rocky, as they went to war with neighboring city-states like Assyria and Elam. Babylon was responsible for two brutal attacks on Jerusalem in the 6th century BC. The Babylonians even destroyed the first temple and allegedly stole the Ark of the Covenant. Their supremacy over the ancient world would finally come to an end when Alexander the Great captured the city in 331 BC. Number 9. The city of Erbil. Erbil in Iraq is currently home to about 1.5 million people. But while this city has all the modern amenities you would expect, it is in fact very ancient. It's one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, with its origins going back 8,000 years. The oldest part of the city is the ancient citadel at its center. At the very core of Erbil is a distinctly oval-shaped block of structures built over a raised earthen mound. The mound is at least 6,000 years old, yet the buildings on top of it come from the 19th and 20th centuries. The modern structures have prevented archaeologists from digging down to the layers of the ancient city. Because of this, all we really know about Erbil comes from ancient accounts. John McGuinness, an archaeologist with the University of Cambridge, says the existence of the city was little more than a hypothesis for years. Because there were no excavations, there was no way to officially declare an ancient city buried underneath the new one. But all of that has finally changed. For the first time in history, researchers just completed major excavations at the northern edge of the mound. They used ground-penetrating radar to identify a pair of huge stone structures underneath the center of the citadel. It's believed these structures might be the ruins of the original temples built at the city's core 2,500 years ago. One of them could be the Temple of Ishtar, dedicated to the Assyrian goddess of love and war. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait a while for new excavations to reveal more secrets. But we still have the historical accounts to tell us the story of Erbil. It was the home of Assyrian kings up until Alexander the Great conquered it in 331 BC. Remember him? This city was also witness to 3 battles between the Romans and the Persians. It suffered an attack by Genghis Khan in the 13th century and was bludgeoned by cannons in the 18th century. Even just a few decades ago, the ancient city of Erbil was damaged by tanks belonging to Saddam Hussein. This city has been through a lot. And now for number 8. But first, it's shout-out time! I wanted to say a big thank you to Bama and Yellow Flossy 3 for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about unbelievable places from history. Number 8. Crocodilopolis. Crocodilopolis was ancient Egypt's city of the crocodile god. The Greeks literally called it Crocodile City because it was the center of worship for the Egyptian water god Sobek. Sobek was almost like the Egyptian equivalent of Poseidon from Greek mythology, only he was always depicted as a crocodile. The city was likely founded in the Old Kingdom, starting sometime around 2686 BC. When the city was first occupied, it was known to the Egyptians as Shadet. Built on the shores of Lake Karun in the Fayoum Oasis, Shadet benefited from fertile lands, plenty of water, and a seemingly abundant supply of crops. The city inhabitants believed their prosperity was because of their dedication to Sobek. This caused the cult to flourish, and at some point they started worshipping a very real crocodile. Egyptian cult worship was something truly spectacular. Shadet was home to the divine crocodile called Petsukos, or the son of Sobek. Petsukos would be dressed in gold and gems and kept in a special pond inside its temple. The divine crocodile was fed by priests whose only job was to keep the beast happy. Whenever the crocodile died, it would be replaced by a new one. The oasis city continued to prosper, and under control of the Greeks in the 4th century BC, it took on the name Crocodilopolis. Much like the city of Erbil, Crocodilopolis never died. It still exists today as the modern city of Fayoum, with all traces of the crocodile cult hidden under the shifting sands. If you worshipped an animal as a god, what animal would you choose and why? Let me know in the comments below. Number 7. The Svan Blood Revenge Towers. In the Caucasus Mountains of Georgia's northern border, there is a historical region called Svaneti. It's part of the modern province of Ushguli, but its history goes back many thousands of years. The Svan are a group of ethnic Georgians who speak their own language, a language which happens to have no written alphabet. They date back to 1900 BC and have been living the same lifestyle for centuries. Starting around the 8th century AD, the Svan began building fortified tower dwellings called koshki. These things speckle the mountains and can be found scattered in the wilderness. Hundreds of them built on ridges, in the woods, and on isolated hilltops. They serve to protect small family groups from raiders and during times of blood feuds. The most recent koshki were made in the 18th century. Most of them are abandoned, but many are in almost perfect condition and still used today. You might be curious about the blood feuds. There is an ancient feudal system of blood revenge that is still practiced by the Svan today. This ancient custom is fairly simple. If someone insults another person, the person offended by the insult retaliates with murder. They either murder the person who insulted them or a male member of their family. After somebody dies, the family of the murder victim is then able to retaliate against the other family. The blood feud cycle has then begun and essentially never ends. Even though there are only 30,000 ethnic Svan left in Georgia, blood feuds still permeate their society to this day. Number 6. Mukawir. The fortress of Mukawir lies in ruins at the top of a hill overlooking the vast and desolate Dead Sea. Its perch is roughly 3,000 feet above sea level. Giving it such an impressive vantage, it's no surprise that it was used as a military outpost. Around 90 BC, King Alexander Genesis of the Hasmoneans ordered a fortress to be built on the strategic hilltop to prevent invasions. But seeing the invasion coming, it didn't do much to save the Hasmoneans. The fortress was destroyed in 57 BC, and this would be the end of days for the Hasmonean dynasty. If you're familiar with the Bible, you'll recognize the Hasmoneans as the ruling party of Judea starting around 140 BC. They were descendants of the Maccabee family, but their rule only lasted about 80 years. The kingdom briefly regained some lost boundaries, only to be decimated and wiped out. The fortress of Mukawir was rebuilt by Herod the Great in 30 BC, 7 years after the defeat of the Hasmoneans. It was inside the rebuilt Mukawir fortress that John the Baptist was imprisoned before he was beheaded. Then came the Romans. In 72 AD, during the full-out Roman assault on the Jews of what would become Israel, the fortress was destroyed. It was obliterated, with nothing left except scraps from its foundations. These foundations were discovered briefly in 1807, but not excavated until 1968. Number 5. Ethiopia's Camelot, Fasil Gebi. In the Middle Ages, Ethiopian emperors practiced the tradition of traveling around the countryside with all of their belongings. They would live off whatever the peasants gave them and live in small, easily portable tent cities. There would be entire imperial camps where emperors lived. Then, in the 17th century, Emperor Fasilides broke with tradition. Instead of progressing through the territories of Ethiopia as the royal nomad, he built a city. He founded the legendary city of Gondar and made it his capital. In that capital was built what many have called Ethiopia's Camelot, the Fasil Gebi. Hassan ibn Ahmad al-Haymi was a traveler from Yemen who detailed his adventures and the places he saw. He visited the emperor's stone castle in 1648, very soon after its construction. He learned that the architect was an Indian stonemason who went by the name Abd al-Karim. Hassan described the castle as an outstanding wonder, a marvelous house of stone and lime. The emperor truly enjoyed living a stable existence. The emperors who came after did too. In 1696, it was claimed there were 80 royal children running around indiscriminately on the castle grounds. The imperial compound soon birthed a thriving city around it. But nothing lasts forever. The emperors of Ethiopia vanished, and today the castle, while still standing, is a sad shell of its former self. Number 4. China's Lost Water City. Archaeologists in China recently excavated the ruins of what's being called an ancient water city. This mysterious city was built an estimated 2,500 years ago in Jiangsu province. The Wuxiabang ruins were uncovered just a few miles from one of the biggest freshwater lakes in the country, Lake Taihu. The city may have once looked like a primitive version of Italy's Venice. Researchers say the corners of the city were connected by waterways. Instead of getting from one place to another using solid roads, the citizens used small boats to paddle through the watery avenues. When they wanted to visit a friend, they got in their boat and paddled up to their front door. The city contained 3 main areas. Archaeologists uncovered an inner city, an outer city, and the outskirts. They say the inner city was protected by tall walls and an impressive moat. This was likely where the elite members of society lived, while the peasant class was out on the outskirts. The outer city was likely home to the working class, people who had enough money to have their own boats and their own small dwellings. Would you like to live in a city built on water? Let me know in the comments. Number 3. Sakarang. Sakarang is a ruined city that sits on top of a rock formation deep in the remote wilderness of western Tibet. It was once the capital of the little-known Guj Kingdom, which emerged in the 10th century AD. At the time, there was a major trading route cutting through the vast Tibetan landscape. A group of locals got together and decided to control that trading route. They built themselves a city, then grew bloated from the wealth they extracted from all those trying to move through the region. They were bridge keepers, controlling the flow of traffic in and out of the Garuda Valley. Even today, the ruins of the city are breathtaking. Ruined houses, rough stone walls, destroyed temples, hollow palaces, and Buddhist sanctuaries are all falling to pieces on the rock formation. Sakarang was built like a stone honeycomb at the peak of a mountain. There are even mysterious tunnels that were carved by Tibetan Buddhist hermits, winding like the corridors of an ant's nest underneath the forsaken town. Things didn't go too well for the Guj Kingdom. Jesuit missionaries stumbled across the city around 1624. They asked King Tritashi Drakpa if they could build a Jesuit church and convert the locals, and the king said yes. This enraged his subjects, who then overthrew him in 1630. The royal family was taken captive and the kingdom fell into its death spiral. A central Tibetan government then showed up in the late 17th century and Sakarang was conquered. The city fell into obscurity, only to be destroyed by the Chinese Red Guard in the 1960s. Number 2. The Kanchi Kailasanathar Temple. In the Indian state of Tamil Nadu stands a magnificent temple that's supposedly the oldest thing in the city. The Kanchi Kailasanathar Temple was built in the 8th century as a place of worship for Lord Shiva. The name itself translates to Lord of the Cosmic Mountain. The temple is an amazing piece of architecture, but the story behind it is even more fascinating. It was built in Kanchipuram, one of the 7 sacred cities of Hinduism. The city was chosen by the powerful Pallava dynasty to be a sacred metropolis in the 3rd century. The Pallavas soon used Kanchipuram as their capital, while they lorded over a massive chunk of southern India. They ruled Kanchipuram up until the 9th century AD, when the Chalukyas showed up and defeated them. Chola ruler Aditya I brought the hammer down in 897, ending 600 years of dominance. That was longer than the original Roman Empire was around. It's believed Pallava ruler Rajasima Pallaveswaram was the one who commissioned the construction of the temple. He ruled in the first half of the 8th century. The temple is now the only major structure still standing from the days when Kanchipuram was the capital. Number 1. The Megalithic Builders. Archaeologists in France recently uncovered a fortified compound from 6,300 years ago. The ancient residential site likely belonged to some of the first megalithic builders in Europe. These may have been the very first human beings in Europe to make massive monuments out of stone. They were Neolithic men and women who handcrafted some of the first dolmens, barrows, and other large stone structures. The team of researchers identified an ancient enclosure in southwestern France called Le Pou as the home of the early builders. The site was discovered during a recent aerial survey, 3 ruined buildings constructed on a hilltop. Archaeologists then got boots on the ground and may have been working on excavations ever since. Now, scientists have finally gotten enough information to reveal the details of the settlement. Dr. Vincent Ard from the French National Center for Scientific Research says the people who lived here put a lot of effort into protecting themselves. Researchers found the remains of palisade walls. The settlement was protected by a thick marsh, and they built strong wooden structures. The villagers even had a defensive ditch and what may have been watchtowers. The settlement was discovered near a prehistoric cemetery with some of the oldest barrow tombs in the world. Forget about Mesopotamia. Small settlements like the Pou were where civilization really got started. Thanks for watching! Which of these incredible ancient places do you think was the most impressive when they were at their peak? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon. Bye!